look at it while the rest of the recess. Because I'm sure I'm going to need to know what's in there.
Whenever I get to the
Good. Public forum, respecting free religion, is that the issue? Yeah, a lot of those guys will probably have that. He was great.
I can do that next Sunday at 9 o'clock. So I'll try and get it.
Rise.
Thank you. With all that, are we ready for the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, bring them up. I'm sorry. No, we may as well. Yeah. Defense want to get Dr. Ha in the courtroom? Thank you. Thank you. That'll happen. You have a seat up here, Dr. Ha.
Somebody left a note down here. Somebody left a note down here.
Oh, really?
Fine.
What is it?
I'm gonna let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the front page was the cert itself, like the face sheet. They should be consecutive in discovery.
Everybody ready for the jury, please? right, we should.
May I inquire?
Yes.
On the interruption, I want to talk specifically with respect to your...
Do you remember our last, you're just going to offer him, is my understanding, and then if you need to do more, I'm going to let you.
Sure.
Okay, but let's go through the actual qualifications. That's several pages ago in my notes.
Right. Your Honor, I move to offer Professor Ha in zoology, animal behavior, animal sensing systems, including canines. He will address human remains detection dog and trailing dog.
Mr. Johnson, did you want to voir dire?
Yes, please.
But hold on a second, because I haven't written all this down yet. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, good afternoon, Dr. Ha. So, when we stopped for that break to talk about a legal issue, counsel had been asking you about your credentials. That's where I'd like to pick up. You provided a curriculum vitae in this case, correct?
Correct.
Judge, may I approach with a copy of that curriculum vitae?
Yes.
And just for purposes to indicate what the document is, I'm going to put a People's Exhibit 526 on it.
All right.
So, Doctor, I've done two things with that document to facilitate our discussion. The first is I put page numbers on the bottom, and the second is I highlighted any reference to a canine, a dog, or even a puppy. Could you review that document and still make sure that it's fair and accurate? Yes. Thank you, sir. Let's start to talk about it. So you've got a PhD in zoology, correct?
Correct.
And your thesis was about food supply and home range in the fox squirrel, correct?
No, that was my master's degree.
Right. That's your thesis for your master's degree. For your PhD dissertation title, it was the effects of time and metabolic requirement on foraging behaviors of captive gray jays, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And it's fair to say that in that document, you have quite a bit of impressive experience with gray jays. Gray jays. Yes, as in a bird. Gray jay. Doctor, you've done a lot of work with gray jays.
Not a lot of work. That was all very, very early work back during my PhD time. So I haven't done anything with gray jays since about 1990.
Okay. And you've done a lot of work with primates as well, right?
That's right. That was my work that I did at the University of Washington for about 2 decades.
Okay. And generally speaking, you've done a lot of work with all kinds of animals, as reflected in your CV, correct?
That's correct.
Now, this CV that you provided is 16 pages. Is it accurately numbered?
Yes, it is.
All right. How many pages in do we go before we see a reference to a dog or a canine?
Page 4.
And you'd agree with me there's probably 20 plus entries at least on most of the pages here.
Yep.
So your first section is education. That's on page 1, correct?
Yes.
Your second topic is professional experience, and that's on page 1 as well, right?
Correct.
Then you have research grants start page 2, and it's all of page 2.
Yep.
And all of page 3.
Almost.
Almost, correct. No references to dogs on any of those pages.
That's correct.
No references to canines or puppies on any of those pages.
That's correct.
Then we get into international activities. You have 17 international activities, give or take, listed here.
Yep.
2 of them are related to dogs, correct?
That's correct.
You have the short course, The Misbehavior of Dogs and Cats from 2010.
Yep.
And you have Behavioral Genetics and the Evolution of the Domestic Dog, Implications of Social Behavior, which was a seminar in 2012, correct?
That's correct.
You list 3 scientific publications, correct?
No, I list 52.
And this section here, I'm sorry, you're correct. Scientific publications, early work. I'm going section by section if that's helpful.
3 early work. Mm-hmm.
0 about dogs.
Correct.
You have 3 on gray jay work under that subtopic.
Correct.
0 on dogs, obviously. Human and non-human primate work has 28 entries.
Yes.
And then as you continue on, we get to Crow and Marina Islands bird work, and that's half a page.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to applied animal behavior work, dog, cat, and zoo. That's got 11 entries, right?
Yep.
2 of those are about dogs, correct?
Correct.
So we're on page 7, and we have our 3rd and 4th references to dogs, correct?
Correct.
And here we have, from 2013, the effectiveness of the anxiety wrap in the treatment of canine thunderstorm phobia, correct?
Correct.
And then we have puppy temperament assessments, predict breed in an American Kennel Club group, but not adult temperament, correct?
Correct.
You have a publication submitted, listed, right?
Correct.
And then 4 publications in preparation.
Correct.
None of those are about dogs or canines.
That's right.
Then you have books and book chapters. You have 8 listed. None of those are about dogs or canines.
Right.
Then you have this section called non-peer-reviewed publications that has 4, and one of those is about canines, correct?
Correct.
That's a very brief introduction to statistics, or what to look for in a research journal article, a 3-part article, Chronicle of the Dog.
Correct.
Then you go to scientific presentations, and you have 9 entries with only 3 about dogs, correct?
They mentioned dogs multiple times. Yes, correct.
You have behavioral genetics and evolution of the domestic dog, right?
Correct.
You have the science of the courthouse dog behavior. That's like a facility dog at a courthouse.
Correct.
And then we have stress and happiness in dogs.
Yep.
You should know it when you see it.
Yep.
Then we go down to the scientific presentations, and you've listed 71 of those.
Mm-hmm.
3 of them are about dogs.
Correct.
We have to go a couple pages, 3 pages, but when we get there, we've got the Bichon Frise dogs have linear hierarchies in both pairwise and social settings. Correct?
Correct.
Then we have Hamilton Search and Set Breaking Task, Assessing Canine Cognition, Animal Behavior Society. That one's from Boulder, correct?
Correct.
And then you have From Puppy to Companion, Puppy Temperament, Assessment, Predict Puppy Breeds, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, if I may, I'm going to object at this point. This is straying into cross-examination. This witness has gone page by page describing eminent qualifications to provide expert testimony under Colorado Rules of Evidence. He has expertise on this issue. He has written, he's been published, he's provided lectures on it, he's taught on it, but this idea that we can just narrowly say that zoology, that if you're a zoologist and you've only done 20 or 30 things about dogs, that you're not qualified as an expert is a misunderstanding of what expertise requires in Colorado. This would be useful to the jury. He has specialized knowledge. And at this point, it's clear what the prosecution's cross-examination will be. They think that he's studied too many other things, but his qualification has been established by this voir dire.
This is appropriate voir dire to determine whether or not somebody's an expert or not. You may not like it, but it's appropriate voir dire. I'm not saying, well, wait, I'm going to give any of this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you have 64 scientific presentations listed, right?
Correct.
And then 2 of those pertain to dogs.
Correct.
We have the misbehavior of dogs, an introduction to applied animal behavior, right?
Yep.
And a short course, misbehavior of dogs and cats, correct?
Correct.
That takes us to page 14. Then you list numerous public lectures on animal behavior, dog and cat behavior, right?
Yep.
Is that the behaviorist type of work you were talking about?
Yes, some of it.
Okay.
Not all of my animal behavior work or presentations are on this document.
This is the document that was provided in discovery in this legal case to the prosecution pursuant to court order, correct?
That's correct. I was asked for a copy of my curriculum vitae, which is what I provided.
Thank
my academic record.
Even, it does have professional experience listed on here as well. But. So then we get to honors and awards. You have several of those.
Well, let me make it clear. It has my professional experience as far as my academic job.
You've testified as an expert before, right?
Yeah.
You understand that there are expert disclosures in cases?
I provide what my attorneys ask me to provide.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the jury wants to know about you if you're going to
Correct.
testify as an expert.
Correct.
And the prosecution's entitled by court order to have that information.
Correct.
And this is the document that you provided.
Oh.
That's mischaracterizing what's happened here.
Yes.
You mean this isn't the document he provided?
This is the document he provided,
Okay, well,
in
that
addition
was
to the disclosure and the interview that he.
You know, just move on.
So, Doctor, let me ask you in total, we got this 16-page document, and is it fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, that in 16 pages with 20-plus entries on every page, I was able to highlight 14 entries that have anything to do with dogs?
That is correct.
And they were on the topics that were just explained to the jury.
That's correct.
Are there any references in this entire document to canine handling?
No.
Are there any references in this entire document to cadaver dogs or human remains detection dogs?
No.
Are there any references in your curriculum vitae to trailing?
No.
Are there any references, and this was the issue that was raised by defense counsel earlier, any references in this curriculum vitae to a body farm?
No.
To the University of Tennessee at all?
No.
To the FBI at all?
No.
This is not the sum total of what the court required us to provide. And those topics that he's addressing right now are provided in the interview with the court that encompass what this witness addressed.
I missed the second part of what you said, Mr. Moran, I'm sorry.
What the court has ruled this witness would be allowed to address includes the topics that counsel's now inquiring after. He inquired after these topics with Professor Ha.
I understand.
When they first spoke.
Hold on. I understand that. He's talking about the CV now. The ruling was if he's properly qualified, which is part of the qualification. It may not be all of it, but I rely on he's entitled to ask about it.
Your Honor, if I may.
You're jumping ahead, Mr. Moran. Okay. Go ahead.
So based on this document, and you know what? Enough about the document. Have you ever had any hands-on, have you ever been a dog handler before?
Yes.
Where have you been a dog handler before?
Both in Seattle and in Portland.
With what kind of dogs?
Canine.
And what kind of canine?
Detection. Both cases Malinois.
What kind of detection?
Mostly drug, multiple drug.
Did you certify dogs?
I did not.
So you worked uncertified dogs?
No, I'm sorry. I was a consultant in designing training programs for drug detection dogs for Portland as well as Seattle.
Doctor, that's not my question. My question is, have you ever been a dog handler yourself?
Oh, no.
Have you ever taught, well, let me be more specific. Have you ever had publications on dog handling before?
No.
You didn't list a single course regarding the one that you've taken for canine handling on your CV. Have you ever taken one?
No.
Have you ever trained in handling a dog for narcotics?
Have I experienced the training for narcotics dogs?
Have you been a handler?
No,
Okay.
but I have not been a handler. I have the experience because I work in consulting for such organizations.
Okay.
I am training the trainers who train the dogs.
Do you certify dogs?
I do not.
Have you ever been on a national agency that certifies dogs?
No.
Have you ever handled a human remains detection dog?
No.
Have you ever brought a dog through the certification process for anything?
No.
Well, what about agility and good citizenship? Haven't you certified
I've
that?
done good citizenship and agility.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Have you ever had a human remains detection dog that you maintain training records for?
No.
Have you ever done training sessions hands-on with a human remains detection dog?
Yes.
And have you done it with real human remains?
Yes,
And where did you do that?
in Portland.
How many times?
Probably 3
3 sessions?
sessions.
Like 3 exercises?
Three sets of 10 exercises each.
Okay. Have you ever handled a canine on a crime scene?
No.
Have you ever been allowed to process a crime scene in any capacity?
No.
Have you ever handled a canine in a search and rescue type setting where you're looking for a missing person?
No.
Ever done it in a disaster recovery setting?
No.
Now, your profession as a behaviorist, it sounds like an excellent certification and one that you're proud of, and you should be. But if I understand it right, you manage and evaluate behavioral problems with pets.
Amongst other things.
Okay. Is it fair to say that your applied animal behavior work, for the most part, you go into homes helping people with canine behavioral issues?
That was what I did for about 15 years, a few years ago. I no longer do that.
Okay. And that would be like dangerous dogs?
Exactly. Inappropriate urination, mostly aggression.
Dogs that jump up on you or bark, things like that. You have videos on your website right now, right?
That's correct.
One of them's for separation anxiety in dogs based on the coronavirus.
That's correct.
One of them's capturing canine personality.
That's correct.
Any on canine handling?
No.
Have you ever testified as an expert in human remains detection canines?
Not human remains, no.
Never.
I've given a deposition. I did not appear in court.
Have you ever been qualified in a court of law before a jury like this as an expert in human remains detection canines? Judge, at this point I object. And Mr. Moran's request started off as zoology, animal behavior, and animal sensing. And then the second time he said it, he included human remains detection and trailing dogs. This witness has absolutely no credentials to warrant a review of human remain detection or trailing dogs. He's probably an excellent behaviorist, and I'm sure that he's got a lot of knowledge about biology. The court has a copy of his CV. He has no qualifications whatsoever to testify about the work that handlers have done. I would additionally renew my objection that there's nothing provided in the CV or the report to indicate any such credentials, or that he's done any kind of reviews of any kind of records or work done in this case that were provided to me. So I object to him as an expert in those areas, and I object to his testimony.
Your Honor, the credential outside of a doctorate in zoology, you don't need a doctorate to be a dog handler, but it would help. He has eminent qualifications about animal behavior, which is what in fact is happening when you're training a dog and the dog is responding and doing the things it's been trained to do. This expert has provided an interview to counsel and their investigator and described working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is under the Department of Justice, that they're creating the standards that trainers use. And as other witnesses have described, there is a lack of standardization. You can go to Montana and get a tri-state level 1 certification with very little work required, unlike the professor here who has a doctorate in zoology. And I guess if the court wants counsel or wants defense to keep belaboring this point, I will talk to him about being a research assistant from 1982 to 1983, or I'm sorry,
I don't want you to belabor the point. Okay, I was ready to rule before you started talking. Is there anything else you want to say?
If I need to add more to his qualifications, I'm happy to.
I would give you that opportunity if I thought it was necessary.
Okay.
It may be slightly necessary. So you listen to what I have to say.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I am going to find the rules on experts doesn't require that he have any expert have a PhD or a master's degree. They just have to have more knowledge than the average person. Whatever you think about all from over here, from both sides, he certainly has specialized knowledge in the field of zoology. He has specialized knowledge in the animal sensing systems. I'm okay with that. I think he can testify as an expert as how animal sensing systems interact with searching for human remains. But in terms of him being a human remains dog, I'm not seeing it. So if you think there's something else, or an expert on human remains dogs, if you think there's something else that you can get out of them, you're certainly welcome to get on that list.
Judge, I think that completely, do you want this record at the bench?
Not particularly.
Okay, because the disclosure describes in detail the human remains detection information that Dr. Ha, professor, would provide.
What disclosure are you talking about?
The one from February of 2019 that the court referenced in its order, saying that if it was provided in the disclosure, it would be available for us to provide as information
Which
to the
disclosure?
jury.
Are you talking about your disclosure?
Yes,
Or
sir.
the one that Dr. Hopper presented?
The disclosure that Your Honor referenced in the order describing...
There are two different types. We're talking about two different things, Mr. McBain. And as I told you before we left, it's not what you think this witness knows and is able to do. It's what he has shown and provided. And those are two separate things.
Your Honor, the document's labeled expert disclosure. I cleared it with Dr. Ha. I provided it to the court. The court approved us providing information to the jury based on that disclosure. And we've relied on that until...
I disagree with you as to the meaning of my order. Did you want to make any record, Mr. Johnson, or not?
I agree with the court, Judge. That's my record.
So I guess at this point what counsel will need to do is provide an offer of proof as to the information we would have provided through this witness. If the court's precluding us from referencing human remains detection dogs,
Judge, and I'm happy to make a record at the bench if counsel wants.
Well, I was thinking about doing it a different way, but we may as well do it now.
Judge, I mean, I'm just searching the letters HRD in the report that Investigator Heidel wrote after the interview we made Dr. Ha available for, and there are 9 different references to HRD, and that's just looking up the acronym.
Judge, I'm happy to have this conversation, but Mr. Moran's talking to the jury about things that aren't in the CV and Dr. Ha wasn't able to talk about, and we've already litigated and the court's ruled on. So having him stand there and talk about it, I think we should at least approach.
Why don't you come up, Mr. Moran and Mr. Johnson? I'm glad you both said thank you so sincerely. I appreciate that.
Dr. Ha.
No. I slowed things
down. What I would like to
Not yet. Okay. All right. Now you may proceed.
is provide some further foundation, remind counsel as to what we discussed with them when we had that interview.
Don't add the editorial comment. Just do the foundation, please.
Okay. What I want to provide foundation on is human remains detection understanding that you've acquired over the years of being a doctor. You mentioned that you train the trainers. Could you elaborate on that as it relates to human remains detection?
Did I do what?
Train the trainers.
Train the trainers. So what human remains detection has to do with, as well as any other kind of dog detection kind of program, is learning and memory on the part of the dogs combined with the
This is all prior to him being an expert. The question
this is part of voir dire, and this is what I'm trying to determine if he's an expert, so I think it's appropriate. Go ahead.
As you were saying, learning and memory.
So learning and memory as well as sensory system. So I have studied up extensively. I have had coursework, and much of the research that's listed on that CV, I have to use the principles of memory and learning and sensory detection in a wide range of species of animals. And what I'm training on is how to improve the methods of, and I have done border patrol and drug detection. I have done human remains detection. I have done this for courthouse facility dogs, and so on. So I'm teaching the principles that underlie the biology, if you want, physiology, the neurosystems that underlie training a dog to do anything, and how well they can do that and how efficient they do that. Statistically, I have a whole textbook on statistics. I do statistically the ways of validating that work and testing the dogs, certifying the dogs, if you like. And so that's how I'm involved in this. And I do not handle the dogs myself. I train and help try them to improve their methods.
Let me ask you a question, or a couple questions. So you're teaching the scientific principles?
That's correct, and I'm teaching from the scientific literature that's out there, the research that's been done about what dogs can and can't do.
But you're not then then the people that have more experience in dealing with training dogs are developing the systems that incorporate those principles, or? Okay.
I don't want to cut you off, but yes.
Okay, but you're not involved in that portion of it.
That's correct.
Okay, so my ruling so far stands.
When you've discussed, and there's a lot of references in here to applications or apply. What do you mean by that? When you're applying your understanding of zoology, is that related to dog handling?
And other things. So applied animal behavior is a relatively new subfield, and I'm one of the leaders in that subfield, in which we are trying to take what we know about animal learning, mammalian learning, wolf learning, coyote learning, and say that should help us learn more and be able to work better with the animals in our immediate world, like dogs, to get specific. But we do it for a wide range. So what we've known and what we've learned about animal behavior within the textbooks, within the courses, within the scientific literature for the last 50 or 100 years, we're now, a new wave of people are starting to take that and say, we can make dog detection better, we can make dog training better, we can more efficiently choose guide dog puppies, we can reduce commercial breeding of dogs, things that are issues that are in current issues, public health issues, reduce aggression problems in dogs and so on.
Does your understanding of animals include an understanding of mammals?
It is, in my particular case, my particular focus is in mammals. And so I have not a certification or anything, because there is no certification in animal behavior, but I keep my work to mammals, because mammals all function fundamentally similarly. Brain works, the learning is similar, and so I try not to stray too far. Birds are different things and do it differently. Lizards are different things. I don't do that.
Is it fair to suggest that when you embark on the study of zoology, you start with more simple organisms and move to more advanced?
That's not going to get you where you need to go. Would you focus? Because we've been doing this for a long time. Most people are qualified well before this. If you're going to get there, you should get there pretty quick.
Is your study of mammals and animals in general give you information about how they relate to humans and how they might respond to a human seeking to have them sense something?
Certainly. And my knowledge of the scientific literature on the things, the chemistry of what they're detecting, my knowledge of the scientific literature, mastery of the scientific literature on what dogs can detect, breed differences, which is my new next book coming out, and so on. So we're studying that literature very heavily.
Let me interrupt you just to speed things up. I would think that would be included in animal behavior, which I believe was part of what you wanted, wasn't it?
That would be the applied.
Which would get into the cueing part. But that's not what we're talking about here, where you're lacking, okay? It's the human, the trainer of the trainers is where you were trying to go. Okay. And we're trying to establish that a little more.
And Judge, to be clear, I'm not objecting to everything. Okay, right, okay. It's
I
just,
totally understand that.
okay, thank you.
It's justice to human remains, is that my understanding? Is that
It's
accurate?
to be an expert in terms of handling a human remains dog. So all the scientific principles you can testify to, he's not so far going to be able to testify exactly how a dog should be trained. He can say that that may violate something that happens violates the scientific principle that he's aware of. That would be part of his expertise, and that's what I've been trying to tell you, Mr. Mayor.
Has your applied animal behavior work been almost exclusively canine specific?
Yes.
Did you begin your interest in canine handling in 1999 at the University of Washington?
Began my training in canine behavior in 1986 during my PhD program when I assisted in the teaching of a dog behavior program at the fine Colorado State University institution.
Did you open a clinical practice advising people who were developing service tracking and search and rescue dogs?
I did, 1999.
Have you provided consulting in these areas?
Let me be specific, to what?
To canine handling.
Yes.
Who did you provide that consulting to?
I've consulted with the Seattle Police Department. I've consulted with the King County Police Department. These are the drug bomb detection. I've consulted with the Boston Police Department. I have consulted with the FBI.
And are you helping them create the ways by which they standardize certifying their dogs to do detection work?
That's correct. And changing also the procedure, improving the procedures by which they train the dogs based on the latest information that comes out in the scientific literature. Regardless of whether I did the research, the idea is that we publish our scientific work so others can use it to build on.
You work with groups that certify canines and human remains detection.
I do.
Any different than what we talked about?
I'm sorry?
Any different than what you and I talked about?
Yep.
Okay. We know that.
Okay. I'm just going through what they have. And you have advised the FBI on training capabilities with human remains detection dogs, right?
That is correct.
And again, anything other than the scientific principles?
The scientific principles and the concepts and make suggestions. They are the ones who are handling the dogs and training the dogs. So how that is physically on a day-to-day implemented and so on is up to them.
Are you telling them how to better handle their dogs, incorporating those scientific principles?
Or how the way they are training or certifying their dogs is not valid, has lower validity or not valid, and that how they can improve that validity. How that's implemented, if you want to get down to what you do with the leash and how many times a day you do it. I had never had any authority in doing that. I'm a consultant. I'm a private scientific consultant coming in and giving them advice based on my knowledge.
Do you provide?
Sir, hold on, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Judge, I think that's a perfect explanation about why he shouldn't be qualified as in canine handling for human remains detection, but some of the scientific principles that the court talked about would be just fine, and I'm not objecting to those.
All right, you're not going to get there. I mean, it's gone on long enough, Mr. Moran.
I have my final question on this.
All right, go ahead.
Do you help handlers determine how to reduce false positives in the handling of their dogs?
Yes.
I'm moved to qualify him as an expert.
Hold on. Explain that.
So when I spoke before about validity, one of the major issues is the very, very high rate of false positives that we see where the dog makes an indication, a trained response, and there's nothing there. It's an incorrect answer. And so how to test those rates, to challenge the dog and test those rates, and then how to change the procedures to reduce the problem of false positives, which is a very common problem with detection.
And has a dangerous impact.
Objection sustained.
And so, Judge, this isn't in here, and he's not referenced a single publication he's done, and he's not referenced a single class that he's done. And so that's a sweeping, broad statement. It's actually him straying into the expertise prior to the qualification, but it's just not supported by anything that we have in discovery or anything that he said today other than that generalization that was a leading question from counsel.
Your Honor, it's mammalogy, it's vertebrate biology, it's instructor for principles of animal biology. It's principles of animal biology, vertebrate biology, that he's been teaching for decades as listed in his CV. The fact that there is not a class offered at the University of Washington that is specifically about dog handling doesn't mean that this expert doesn't know what the dogs are doing when they're responding to their handler and sensing things that they are telling the handler through, with these dogs, final trained responses. He understands the way their brains work, the way their sensory systems work, and how that interacts with the human that is that creature's handler.
So, Judge, I could give an example, but if he wanted to talk about a study that involved cueing, I have no objection. If he wants to analyze what people do with the leash and the dogs and the training, he himself just said he's not involved in that. That's the distinction I'm asking, and I think that's the ruling the court's already made.
That is the ruling I've already made. Hold on a second. So don't report anything, because it'll move what I'm reading. Okay. In terms of helping people eliminate false positives on human remains dogs, what exactly are you talking about? What are you doing?
We're talking about some of the biases that produce those false positives, such as something called cueing, where the handler maybe inadvertently or inadvertently cueing the dog. We're talking about things like concentration of the gases that may be available that, if they get too low, will produce false positives. We're talking about knowledge that we have, in the scientific field, have about the attachment between humans and dogs and the relations of dogs.
So it's my same rule. So that I think comes in under the scientific principles, Mr. Moran. So I don't know if we're just arguing about nothing or what.
I'm starting to see like in my...
Well, that's why I asked you to listen to me very carefully.
I'm listening intensely.
Well, maybe I'm just not articulate enough. So
I'm offering him as an expert in zoology, animal behavior, animal sensing systems. The court's ruling that he will not be qualified as a human remains detection handler, understood.
maybe a little bit more than that, but you'll be accepted as in those areas and on the scientific level, not on the practical level.
Professor, did you have an opportunity to review?
And just so we know what's going on, and I'm sorry, since we're just starting, you probably have quite a bit of time on this.
Judge, yes, and, yes.
Okay. Can you do a subject for 20 minutes, or what?
Dr. Hawes, not available starting tomorrow when he flies home.
Well, that could be a problem. All right, let's get started. I'll be thinking about it. Go ahead.
Dr. Haw, did you have an opportunity to review training records of a dog handler by the name of Ray Randolph?
Objection. He's starting right where the court ruled he shouldn't go and where I explained that there was no discovery.
Your Honor, it is absolutely included in the report that Your Honor said would be the subject of this examination.
Well, he was
He has
not,
received discovery, it says specifically, he has formed an opinion regarding the validity of the abilities of 3 canine handlers in this case. He has formed an opinion on material he reviewed with regards to the validity of the cadaver dog tracking and scenting evidence. It specifically mentions Ray Randolph
Objection.
and Karen Corcoran.
hold on.
Objection to counsel testifying.
Page 2 of 8 does talk about he did receive some reports, doesn't it, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Judge, and he received records, and he didn't review them all, and he didn't opine on any of them. So he made a couple sweeping statements in there, but as not an expert in handling, I thought we were going to talk about some science, and I thought that was the purpose and the ruling and the qualification. But the first question from Mr. Moran is he's going to start asking about a person who's never certified a canine or handled a canine to look at training records and evaluate them. That's exactly why I'm objecting, Judge.
He creates those training systems, those certification systems for law enforcement agencies and otherwise to include the Department of Justice.
I'm sustaining the objection.
We will not be allowed to inquire as to the specifics of Ms. Randolph.
That's not what I said. You're not going to be able to get into him about a defect in training records if that's where you were going.
Okay. Permission to approach.
Yes.
I'm going to provide to you, sir, People's Exhibit 186. It's a trailing certification level 1. You could take a moment to acquaint yourself with it, and particularly the last page here, which describes how a dog would obtain that certification.
Same objection, Judge, and the court's seen this document, the jury's seen this document. He's going to comment on the procedures used to certify something he's never done before.
Your Honor, what
He does have some experience in trailing. I know he's taught, not trailing, we call it tracking, scent tracking, I believe. Is this going in the issue with the pillowcase? Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Johnson?
The issue of what, Judge? I couldn't hear
The
that.
pillowcase.
Oh, I imagine it is, Judge. And I object because I don't think he's qualified to evaluate the procedures used by the certifying agency.
Well, he also talked in the report about his concern about the lack of certification, and if I remember right, her certification on that had expired for a short period of time.
Agree, Judge. And I think this is something that Dr. Hawk could be asked if it's problematic if someone's not certified. I think it's a perfectly fine question, and I wouldn't object to it. But bringing up documents and analyzing records is what he's not qualified to do. If he thinks there's a problem with a lack of certification, he can say that generally, and the jury can apply it.
You can approach with the document.
Let me know when you familiarize yourself enough with it to speak on it, sir.
Okay?
Permission to approach.
Yes.
Allow a handler who was provided materials from a house in Colorado Springs to scent a dog on this hat in the house in Colorado Springs. And if that dog was scented with this certification, with this article, all from the same house, what would it go do?
If this seems to be a scent lineup, a scent comparison. And so this dog, from the records that I've seen, is not qualified and has not been certified in scent lineup.
What you have in front of you is a lapsed certification for trailing, correct?
That is correct.
Objection, more leading questions, Judge. This is a direct exam. Right, but that part of it was okay. Try not to lead in the future.
Would a certification in trailing have taught the dog principles necessary to do a scent lineup?
No.
Why?
Because a scent lineup is a very different cognitive task. The scent lineup is a very different requires a very different kind of training. In fact, I know Swig Dog has been mentioned in here in the past, and so there are federal guidelines, best practices, and that is exactly why there are best practices which are separate for the training of trailing or tracking and for scent lineup work. And so those are two different kinds of tasks. And another guidance from Swig Dog is that you don't cross-train dogs for two tasks. So this dog not only was not cross-trained, but it was not trained for doing scent lineup work. That's a very different kind of cognition.
Cognitively, it's very different for a dog to do these two different things, trailing and scent identification.
Absolutely.
And without a certification, what does that mean to you with respect to what the dog was asked to do?
It means it was inappropriate.
Right. So if all of these things came from the same place, how would these things be perceived to a dog?
Generally, they'd be perceived as the same thing. And particularly for a dog that's got scent trailing kinds of background, not the high level of discrimination in close quarters that's taught and required in the scent lineup work, it would consider these all the same. They come from the same place. They're all going to have the same smell.
What is in front of you is, with that certification that's been admitted into evidence, is also a description of how that dog demonstrated its ability to do something different trailing. Would you agree?
Correct.
And would you describe how what's being done in that trailing exercise is different for a dog than being asked to discriminate scent related to these items here on the desk?
Okay, so what the dog is being done in the trailing is being given a target scent to start with. It's out in a very open area, and it's moving through an open area, and its job is to find and keep track of that one scent with confusing scents, crisscrossing it, and so on. It's done in a very open area, must be at least a mile long, for instance, for the certification to occur. So you're in a very open area, and it has to track one particular scent through that tangle. In the lineup work is very challenging. Very few dogs can do lineup work. The lineup work problem is that the objects are generally indoors, and they're in a very small place, and the targets, the potential targets, are in very close proximity, relatively speaking. Even 5 feet apart is for airflow of particles is very close together. So it's a great challenge. We're on the edge of canine cognition to be able to accurately distinguish one square from another square, one piece of clothing from another piece of clothing, or match. What they really need to do is match to whatever they were given, one square to another square to another square. Particularly if the targets have been pooled together or anything like that, that just makes it that much more difficult. So discriminating in close quarters, I guess, is far more challenging than trailing a scent through open country.
If all of the items in this bag and this hat came from a house that was shared by at least 4 people, would it smell like that place or not?
Sure.
And if you will, all the pillows are under people, but if there was a pillow a pillow taken from a totally different house, and the dog was scented on this item taken from the Colorado Springs house and sent out to see if it would find this pillow. Based on what you know about dog sensing systems, the dog scented with that hat would do what with respect to the pillow?
Ignore the pillow.
How would the dog perceive the pillow relative to how it perceived all of the things in this bag?
Perceive it as a non-match. It's not from the same environment.
Stop. And I know you want to get your flight tomorrow, but you have to wait till he's done with his questions, so she's
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. And let's just, you need a drink? You need something?
Here's one.
She's got her own.
How would that dog perceive the pillow?
He would perceive that pillow as being different, not a match.
So if this pillow comes from dad's house, where a child laid his head on it, would it smell different than all of these items collected from mom's house 6 hours away?
I would expect that would be the case. The trouble with any evidence coming from a dog is we can't get inside the dog's brain. So the dog is trained to pick up and target on the strongest smell. And so, and I would suspect that coming from the house, the strongest smell would be smells from the house. We don't know, but strongest smells, their air freshener, their fabric softener, whatever, and that is the smell that they would be matching. Now, it would click on all those other things from the same house. The pillow from a different location would not smell like that.
What would be required, what's described for that level 1 lapsed certification require extreme scent discrimination for a dog?
What's required, let me clarify the question, is what's required here, does that require extremes? It does not require the most extreme. In other words, if you're assessing dogs and training dogs, trying to find dogs, you'll find many more dogs that can do this than can do a scent line. Did that answer the question?
I think so. Does Tri-State, which is that certification there, have a level 2, 3, 4 certification that you're aware of?
I don't know.
Is Tri-State a nationally recognized certification agency?
No.
Have you ever heard of them before, Doctor?
No. Not before this case.
And this trailing 1 exercise that's described there, it required the dog to bypass 1 additional scent. Is that right?
That's correct.
Here, if a dog was asked to relate these scents, how many different scents would have to be distinguished?
Your imagination is as good as mine. I mean, that coming from a house, it's an uncontrolled environment, and then you're mixing them all together in porous plastic bags so that those scents are going to be mixed up. You know, I'm not an expert in the production of human scent and what scents are found in houses. I assume it would be a large number of scents.
What happens for a dog when items are placed in a hamper?
The scents all become mixed.
No, that was not.
That was the testimony of my
That
call.
was testimony was it was not in a hamper. It was specifically limited. It was not in a hamper. Now this is a similar situation.
There were 2 different witnesses on that, Your Honor.
All right.
Let's say that items were placed in this big black trash bag, and within the trash bag, items were sealed themselves. Would that prevent the scent from commingling?
No.
Is what this represents a potpourri of the scent of one place?
Yes.
And this would be the scent somewhere else.
That's correct.
Is there any evidentiary value to
Objection
to the reform of the
question.
I mean, I understand the questions. I'm not objecting because I know the doctor's got to travel. But asking him to conclude the evidentiary value is an improper question.
It is. You can ask him if he sees any value to it, but the evidentiary part is what the problem is.
what would the value be if you scented a dog on this hat and it didn't go to that pillow?
It tells me nothing.
If this dog, though, was scented on this hat and it went and found something out of this bag, what would that tell you?
That would make sense.
Because these things all smell the
Correct.
When you're ready to move to another area, I want you to.
I'm ready.
Okay. Come on up, Mr. Johnson. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. Take him with you and go out in the hallway. Okay.
I'm done.
No, no, but you're part of this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, what they're discussing is how they're going to handle the rest of this testimony, because it appears the direct is going to go on for a significant period of time. It's Friday night. I know some people are working after court, and it's real hard for me to keep concentration. I imagine it's hard for you guys too. So we're not going to work late tonight. So
I'm just waiting on counsel, Judge.
that's fine. I bet it is. I do. It's hiding over here. I've got mine. You keep that one. Do you have both of them? Oh, I still have this one. Well, this is that one. And the other one. Okay. And I think I'm done with this one. And maybe we can resolve another issue off the record before we go on the record in there while you guys are doing the other one. But there was two issues that came up today. Okay. Well, I hope so. The other one. Although I should have said it nicer, I'm sorry.
Where are we?
Your Honor, I would like to see the jury excused for the day. They don't need to be.
Are you guys disagreeing about something?
No, I agree to remote testimony if you'd like to do it, Judge. You have all options available. I understand the doctor's got to travel, and so I informed them of that, and this will be their decision from there.
Have you made a decision on it?
No.
Okay.
Other than Mr. Redwine has a right to face-to-face confrontation in the state of Colorado, so we are deeply concerned.
Well, hold on. The confrontation doesn't come in on your witness. No, they don't go to confrontation on your witness. That's just kind of silly.
The right to face-to-face in Colorado
is confrontation. It has a right to face its accusers. If you think Dr. Ha is one of his accusers, I wouldn't have him come back.
Judge, I'm open to either option and won't object so the jury can hear the rest of the testimony. So if Mr. Moran prefers to do travel arrangements, that's fine. If you want to do remote testimony, I'm amenable to that too.
All right. I'm fine with either. You figure out what you need to do. Ladies and gentlemen, let me read you your the same admonitions I've been giving you for 4 weeks now. Well, I guess you guys weren't here the whole first week, so maybe only 3. Don't discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else during the course of the trial. Do not initiate, post, or respond to anything about this case on social media. In fairness to the parties of the lawsuit, please keep an open mind throughout the trial. You should reach your decision only during final deliberations, which again don't start until after all the evidence, all the arguments, and the reading of instructions. Don't permit any third person to discuss this case with you in your presence. If anyone attempts to do so, let me know. Don't talk with any witnesses, with the defendant, any of the lawyers. Don't gather any information on your own. Don't do any outside reading. Don't visit any of the places. Don't read about the case in the newspaper. Obtain information on the radio, television, internet, or social media, or other media source about the case. Don't learn about the case outside the courtroom. You must base your verdict solely on the evidence presented at trial. I had thought this morning and yesterday that we might need to work through Friday, depending on how the evidence fell. That may not be the case now, but please keep Friday open, because depending on how things work, and I don't know how it's going to work, but if we're in the situation where there's closing arguments ready to go on Friday, which is hopeful, I wouldn't count on it. I want to work through that whole day. Okay? So don't make any arrangements on Friday. If we're still in evidence at that point, then Friday afternoon. Okay? So everybody rise for the jury? Okay, well, you guys have some thinking to do, and guess we'll see what happens. We'll be in recess.
Can I just make a record about what the thinking we're doing and my plan? Thank you, Judge.
I forgot.
You good?
Go ahead.
Regarding Dr. Danielson, Torney, Dixon, Texas Forensics Science Commission report, if the litigants can reach a stipulation regarding the qualifications of Dr. Danielson, regarding the topics that you can talk about and what topics he will be subject to on cross-examination, I will email that stipulation to Your Honor and to opposing counsel, best of my ability, by 6 this evening.
As long as it's tonight, I don't care.
Okay, tonight. If we cannot reach a stipulation, I'll send an email to the parties informing Your Honor of that. We're operating under the previous record that if we can reach a stipulation, then Your Honor will not be considering the previously submitted materials regarding these issues to determine whether or not Dr. Danielson gets to testify at all or in what capacity regarding DNA and trace evidence.
Well, there'd be no reason to, would there? So there you go.
Okay.
All right. Now we're off the record.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Have a good weekend. Well, we'll see.